Two guys in the dark.
Back in 2008, I think, I had graduated high school, but was still living with my parents in their house, along with my younger brother and my sister, who at the time were in high school and junior high. It was Halloween Eve, meaning the next day was Halloween, and we were all asleep in our beds. Now I have to tell you that although we lived on a nice-ish street, we lived in a town known for gangs and drug deals and random crazy weirdos. It was a little scary to hear gunshots and police sirens in the too close for comfort distance every single night. But hey, it was home. Anywho, at about 4 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like a gunshot on our front porch, followed by shouting and violent pounding on our front door. I was curious, but also scared out of my mind. Creeped up to my second floor window and peered out the front yard, and an obstructed view of the porch. This was all I could see, and aside from hearing a regular stream of cursing and more pounding on the door, I had no clue what was going on for what seemed like hours. But in reality, it was probably only about 20 minutes. Finally, my brother came bursting into my room to ask if I was okay. I told him yes, but what in the hell is going on? He had told me this. Some weirdo was at our front door. He had knocked on or tried to break down our door, and my dad had heard and went to go see what was happening. He peered through the glass and saw a man on our porch, to which he asked what was wrong, without opening or unlocking the door. The man answered, "They're after me," repeatedly, while glancing back behind him. My dad, seeing that there was no one behind him on a dimly lit street, asked if he would like to use our phone. He said yes, so my dad grabbed our house phone, handed it to him through the doorway. The man then tried to push his way in, but thankfully my dad stopped him and shut the door and then locked it. He then proceeded to call the police on the phone the man had opted not to take. That was the story up to the point where my brother came to check on me. Isn't he such a nice brother? At that point, the man had started screaming profanities, yanking the door handle back and forth violently, and pounding on the walls. And then I heard the shatter of glass. The man had taken a chair from our front porch and thrown it through the front window, which led to my parents' bedroom. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure I was bawling at this point, knowing for sure that he was now in our house. And remember, I woke up to what I thought was a gunshot. I thought about how he was going to kill my parents first, and then run up the stairs to kill me and my brother. My mind raced at all the horrible things that could have been happening downstairs, when amazingly the police pulled up right at that moment. They immediately came into the house and detained the man. Apparently he had climbed through the window, cutting himself in the glass, and crawled on all fours through my parents' bedroom and through the kitchen. Finally ended up in our living room floor, where he just laid down and bled all over our carpet. He didn't have any weapons on him, despite my original theory of him having a gun. I guess I thought, in my rudely awoken state, that the pounding on the door was a gunshot. He was apprehended before he did anything to anyone in my family, thankfully. We thought he was just some druggie who was hallucinating that someone was chasing him. No charges were filed, and we never saw that man ever again. After the police and ambulance left, my dad cleaned up what he could of the bloody mess, and we all went to bed. Unfortunately, all of us forgot about my little sister, who was in a downstairs bedroom in the back of the house. No one had gone to check on her, and no one told her what had happened after it was all over. So she spent the entire night cowering under her blankets thinking something could still be happening. Oops. We have since all apologized to her about this. So that's my story. Even though it was the most frightening experience of my life thus far, at least something good came of it. Since he bled all over the carpets, our insurance paid for new ones, which we already desperately needed, and it was enough to carpet several rooms, way more than we actually ruined. Let me clarify. This happened during my college's Halloween celebration a few years ago, and is the most terrifying experience of my life. One of my roommates, some friends, and myself left to go to a party around dusk, and we were all catcalled by a group of 3 drifters, or homeless people. We thought nothing of it, and went on our merry way. About 4 hours later, we're going back to our apartment to change shoes. High heels and messed up streets are hell when you've been drinking. When one of the drifters calls out to me, "Hey beautiful, how about a kiss?" Me being a little drunk and sassy, I reply, "No thanks, girls are more my type." To my shock and horror, he says, "Hey, my friend here likes the ladies." A homeless girl comes out of nowhere and proceeds to kiss me on the mouth. My friend picks me up and throws me over his shoulder. I proceed to flip the fuck out in my apartment, shrug it off, and we venture back out. Well, I got separated from my group in the crowd, and when I see the three drifters again, I try not to show that I'm shitting bricks. When they ask me where they can find a liquor store, I point down the street to the Kroger, and they say, "Okay, you can show us." I'm a small woman, and they shoved me into their vehicle. I think naively at the time that they will literally let me out at the grocery store. Except that it's closed because it's after midnight. I plead for them to let me out of the car, but they keep saying, "The power does what it wants," and headed away from the safety of the campus area, onto the freeway, and out of the state. For the next 4 hours, I visited 3 states with them, while pleading for my life. I'll never forget how they kept saying the power does what it wants, and talking about how they're going to have fun with me. I kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to die, that I would never graduate college or see my family again. They pulled into a gas station, and I slipped out of the vehicle to be grabbed again, but I screamed my head off for the clerk to help me. That's when they talked about taking me to the cliff. I mentioned that my family is full of police officers, and that they're probably already looking for me, how they're committing a federal crime, and that I won't press charges if they just take me back to campus. I guess that's when the girl started to feel sorry for me because she started to say, "Guys, she's really scared. Maybe we should just drop her off somewhere. This doesn't have to get any worse than it already has." They took me back to campus area, and as soon as the girl pulled me out of the car, a police officer called my name. The girl shoved me towards the cop and yelled, "The power does what it wants, and tonight it lets you live." I've never been so happy to sit in a cruiser. They pursued them, but I don't know if they were ever caught. My roommate dropped out of college and joined the military, and I transferred to another school. So ladies and gentlemen, please be careful walking at night. Always keep your cell phone with you if possible, and call the police if you see suspicious people near your apartment. I had a brush with death that day, and I am so grateful for the time that I have now. This could have been written better, but it's still hard just to talk about this. This happened back in 2014. I went for a night out on Halloween during my first year of university. I was wearing high-heeled boots and a leather jacket. Over the course of the night, drunk me had taken them off and left them at our group's table due to being uncomfortable. By the end of the night, I'd practically danced my way to near sobriety, and I went to my group's table. However, they've given up the table, and my boots and jacket were nowhere to be seen. Someone had stolen them. Whatever, they weren't very expensive, and I rarely wore them anyway. Now, however, I had to walk the 15 minutes back to my accommodation. I didn't have money for a taxi, so I thought that I'd just walk slowly. I asked one guy, the asshole in the group that everyone hated, if he could just keep me company because he was tall. He laughed and told me no, then walked off, dragging the only girl who was shoeless with him. So I was walking alone, shoeless in a busy city center, watching out for broken glass or anything else that was harmful or disgusting. Everyone else was too far ahead that I couldn't even see them, but I just kept on going. I was halfway to my place when I was stopped by a Middle Eastern man. The city was very culturally diverse. He asked if I was okay, and I was grateful someone cared enough to make sure that I was all right. He offered to help me walk home, so I accepted for at least part of the way. He was very kind and told me his name was Omar. He started saying how beautiful he thought I was, and how lucky he was to have found me, which unsettled me slightly. Once I was around the corner from my place, I thanked Omar and said that I'd walk the rest of the way to my own. He instantly looked offended. "Don't you want to invite me in for a cup of tea to thank me?" I told him no, because I don't know him. He kept hold of my wrist. "Well, can I kiss you for helping you?" Again I declined, and his grasp tightened. Well, do I get a hug for being your friend? By this time, I just wanted him to let go, so I gingerly gave him a hug. He then grabbed me and tried to kiss me, but I pressed my lips together, and instead he just licked up on my face. I finally get free, start walking away. He follows me. I speed up, and so does he. I abandon my check for glass on the floor and begin sprinting, now terrified as I hear him running too. I get out my phone and call my friend, Rob, who I beg to help me. Omar is no longer following me, but I needed someone to keep me safe. He agrees and gets to my flat not long after I do with a knife in case Omar was still there. I told the people in my group, and they were mortified that they left me alone. I returned home for a week because I was thoroughly shook up. Now on a night out, I make sure everyone is close by so it doesn't happen again to me or to anyone else that I know. So Omar, I really don't want to ever see you again. That was really uncalled for, especially for someone that you do not know. So this was 2 years ago on Halloween. My best friend and I were leaving a club in Dallas, and we stopped at a gas station to pick up some snacks and some refreshments. This guy comes up to me and tells me that I look pretty. At this point, I'm drunk and not worried about a damn thing, so I just thank him, smile, and continue looking for some munchies. He starts to follow me through the gas station, but I kind of just shrug it off. Me and my friend pay and are walking out when he comes up behind us and asks where we are going. At this point, I'm thinking, fuck off, dude. We say courteously that we are going home, and he seemed to take the hint and fuck off. We started to walk down the street. My friend was planning on driving us home in my car since I was unfit to drive. My friend wasn't 21 yet, so he hadn't been drinking at all. We were about 3 blocks away from my car when we noticed a car driving slowly behind us. We glanced back a few times and realized it's the guy from the gas station following us. We decided that it's not a good idea to lead him back to my car, so we turn around and walk a different way back towards the street where the clubs are. He makes an illegal U-turn and follows us. He then rolls down his window and shouts to us asking if we need a ride. Politely, I say, "No thank you, we are good. We just made a wrong turn." He continues to follow us. We speed up our pace a bit, and he speeds up as well. He calls out to us again through the passenger window asking if we want a ride. I tell him to please stop following us, or I'll have to call the police. He then calls me a cunt, and then speeds off. Yeah, I really hope to never see you again, creepy dude. The first half of the story takes place on Halloween of 1991. Quick bit of background. I was a 7-year-old boy at the time, and my little sister was only a few months old. I lived in Long Island, New York, on the border area of the town that kind of acted as an unspoken separation between the more affluent area and the lower income hood type area. My dad owned a bar across from the train station that was extremely popular in the 80s. It was still riding the tail end of that boom. My father did very well for himself. My father and his business were well known around town. I think this may have to do with what happened. He eventually squandered everything on a heroin addiction, and that's a different story. And for the record, I had nothing but love and respect for him despite all of this. So it was Halloween. My mom was working the night shift at my dad's bar. My sister was home with a teenage babysitter. My dad had taken me and my friend trick-or-treating. This was the first year I was able to go out at night, so I was super stoked. When we get home, there are cops at my house. The babysitter is crying, and my mom came home. Earlier, while the babysitter was alone with my sister, she got a phone call from an unknown woman asking to speak to little super unknown 315. She said I was not there, and the woman stated that she had a gift for me and would call back. This woman called back a few times, saying something similar, and she began to insist that she was going to come deliver her gift. Eventually she called and said to look in the mailbox. This is when the sister called the police. The police found a pirate skull Halloween decoration that would talk and shake when you clapped, as well as several candy bars. My whole family was really bugged out about this. I was scared, but I also kind of liked the skull thing, and convinced my parents after much protest to let me keep it. My parents for a few weeks after that were on edge and hated the toy. They tried to work with the police, but there wasn't much that they could do, and the whole thing kinda went cold. Fast forward to the following summer, 1992. My best friend and I decided to have a car wash in front of his house, which was diagonally across from the street from my house. We had out buckets, soap, hose, and a sign. You get the picture. This black car rolls up. It was an old 80s Crown Vic or something that looked like that. One of those big cars that steers like a boat. Rolls down the window, and there's a woman sitting in the driver's seat. She had short white hair. Kinda had this whole Ursula vibe going on. I told my parents she was old because of the hair, but looking back, she could have been as young as her 40s. She says, "Hi, Super Unknown 315. Do you know who I am?" I said no. She goes, "I'm the one who gave you those presents in Halloween." My jaw drops, and I froze up just staring. Then, like something out of a movie, she begins to laugh maniacally, and then speeds off. I ran home and told my parents about it. That was the end of it, and they never figured out who it was. My father had speculated that this person may have believed he was wealthy, and maybe trying to get a ransom or something. Maybe she was a scorned ex-lover. I don't know. I'm speculating many things, but we'll likely never know at this point, as I am now 35, and that was like a lifetime ago. This has definitely bugged me for years, and I wanted to share it. In the past year, I've had several of my dad's old friends find me and reach out to me on Facebook. My dad and I have the same name and face, so I was easy to find. 2 of them are women. One of them made me a little uncomfortable because she kept pushing to hang out, and she's a lot older than me. Like, go to the bar, hang out. I said no, of course, but she asked a lot of personal questions. That's what brought the story back to the forefront of my mind. I'm definitely getting a weird feeling in my gut that this woman, or even the other ones that found me on Facebook, is the same woman that stalked me as a child. That thought gives me a chill, but I would really like to know who this person was and why they stalked me. This happened a few hours ago. I have called and reported it to the police, and I am home safely, but guess I am still in shock. Could do putting it down on writing to process it, and figured this is as good of a place to share as to what happened. I finished work early today, and so decided to go out for a run. I set out around 4:30 and decided my usual routes, which cross many roads, will not be practical. So I took an alternative route along a canal and some pathways through the woods that I knew would be less busy. Everything was going pretty well. I was pushing myself pretty steady until I got to a pathway on the way back around 6 kilometers into the route. It is a long straight path with a canal on the left side. And on the right, there is a wasteland where some factories used to be, but have been demolished recently. It has been left abandoned for as long as I can remember, and is overgrown with trees, weeds, but there are odd bits of old factory that for some reason, weren't fully demolished. As I got level with one part of the factory, which still had some old metal fire escape steps attached to it, I noticed a rough-looking guy sat on the wall with his legs hanging down. He jumped to his feet as he saw me coming, and shouted something, but I couldn't make it out. As I came level to where he was, I heard him say, "Wait there, can you help me find my phone?" He said this while he was running down the steps, and so I stopped as I got level where the bottom of the step, which meant that we were standing just a few feet apart, but with a fence in between us. It was a really old iron fence with vertical metal bars that have spikes at the top, like you sometimes see around churches and things like that. He asked me if I could help him find the phone again, saying he had dropped it somewhere nearby, and asked if I could ring his number so that he could listen for it. I felt I couldn't exactly refuse, as my phone was strapped to my arm, so I said that he could tell me the number, and I took my phone off my arm and unlocked it. He blurted out a phone number, but said it far too fast, and it didn't begin with 07, which made me start to feel like something wasn't right. Although I was beginning to suspect at this point, I wasn't really worried, as I'm in pretty good shape, had a big size and weight advantage over him, plus there was a fence between us. He didn't seem in very good physical shape, and seemed like he might be homeless. I figured if he was trying to mug me for my phone, his only chance would be if he pulled a knife, so I made sure to stay a good distance away from the fence, and kept my eye on where his hands were. So I told him I didn't catch any of the numbers because he said it too quickly. He came out with another number this time. It did have 07 at the beginning. I entered 7 numbers, and then he started to look around and saying, "I can hear it. Come and help me look," as he looked around at the ground. I was about to say that I hadn't finished dialing when a much larger black guy appeared from behind a section of wall to my right. He was also really scruffy looking, and from the look of his eyes, it seemed like he was on drugs. He came out saying he could hear the phone ringing over towards him, and beckoned me to come through the gap in the fence and help look. The white guy then said, "It is ringing, yeah?" And I told him it was even though I still hadn't dialed the last digits, and now was sure they were trying to lure me to come over to that side of the fence. After 2 or 3 times of them both beckoning me to come and help, always insisting they could hear the ring, I heard the black guy say, "He's not going to fall for it." He said it in a hushed way, as if he thought I couldn't hear, but with it being out in the middle of nowhere, I could clearly understand what he was saying. The white guy then started acting quite aggressive and punched a tree, telling me he needed the phone badly, and how his whole life was on the phone telling me to come and help him look for it. While he was punching the tree and ranting, the black guy had taken a few steps away to the right, meaning I couldn't keep an eye on both of them at the same time. It was after 5 p.m. by this point, and had gotten dark all of a sudden, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. I noticed there was a gap in the fence where some of the bars had been removed right where the black guy was heading, and I decided at that point to get the hell out of there and made a run for it. Neither of them said anything as I ran away, which makes me sure that they had malicious intentions. If they genuinely lost their phone and needed help, I would expect them to shout, "Where are you going?" or something to try to get me to come back, but they didn't shout anything at me. After sprinting for a good 20 to 30 seconds, I turned to see if they were chasing me. They both stood on the path where the gap in the fence had been, but were not chasing me. They were just standing there, watching me run away. I continued running away, but kept looking back every few seconds until I was out of sight. It was at this point I got off the canal path and into the roads. The person I spoke to on the phone to report it took my details and the descriptions, but seemed to think it wasn't anything worth worrying about, but said it will be investigated soon. The whole incident has left me a bit unnerved, and I'm pretty sure that I won't be jogging that route alone anytime soon. It was Halloween of 2008. I was in college and still in a relationship with my first serious boyfriend. We've been together since high school, and it took this night to show me our relationship was abusive. It took one more incident before I finally left him for good. He was wonderful when sober, if intense and controlling, but when he was drunk, I learned he was truly terrifying. This was the first such an incident that truly scared me. He joined in a stupid game, a Gatorade and Shine challenge. They'd empty a bottle of Gatorade at least halfway, fill the rest up with some moonshine. The goal was to finish the bottle within an hour and then tell them crazy stories. Well, he completed the challenge, but he never did tell his friends the story. He couldn't remember most of it, and it painted him in a horrific light. I knew things were heading downhill when he started calling me a slut after saying hi to a guy friend at the party we were at. I decided we'd better head home before he got any worse. I thought I could nip it in the bud. Manage it. We get home and change out of our costumes. James wanted to have sex, but in his state, and after what he'd called me, I wasn't really interested. Oddly enough, it led to him calling me a whore. I left the apartment to go smoke. Our neighbors were having a party, and 2 guys were outside smoking as well. They came over to see if I was okay. I'd been crying, and they heard the yelling. I said I was, which they could obviously see that was a lie. They let me know if I needed help, they'd help me. James chose that moment to come outside, said he'd heard us, and told them to get away from me, stalking towards them. I stood up to get in between them. They told me that they'd meant what they said, and not to forget it, then told him to watch himself. I was facing them to say bye and thanks for the offer when one of the guys gasped, staring at my boyfriend in shock. I turn around and my eyes immediately caught on the ground. Just as what I was seeing registered, the other guy lunged forward and grabbed me, pulling me behind him. What was on the ground that was elicited such reactions, you ask? Blood. Blood was dripping on the ground from his hand. He was holding a knife so tightly he sliced his own hand open. I begged him to drop it, which he only agreed to when I walked back towards him. I was an idiot, I know. The two guys seem at a loss, and I feel so bad for them having their Halloween ruined by this scary, crazy bullshit. They left me to it after I swore I'd be fine, reiterating that I could come to them for help if needed. We got inside, and I immediately started hiding all the sharp objects. Called James' roommates, begging them to come home. He started screaming to give him the knives back, how I was a slut, and if I wouldn't fuck him, what use was I? I called my parents and left, then called his mom because I was scared he'd hurt himself. She let me know how he was my problem now. I should have called the police, but didn't want to ruin his life. I know, it's really stupid of me. I'm ashamed to say I got back together with him for 6 more months. But today, I can safely say, James, I really don't want to see you ever again. You're a nightmare to be with, and you are just a horrible human being. Last night had to be the most frightening night of my life. It's 10:30 p.m. The baby is down for bedtime. I'm in the bedroom trying to fall asleep. Next thing I know, the doorbell rings. It's 10:30 at night. Who the hell is ringing my doorbell? It's going to wake the baby, and I'm near angry and a little shaken. I peek through the peephole and see 2 men that look like they're in their early to mid-20s. At that point, I just get scared. What are 2 strangers doing ringing and knocking at 10:30 at night, especially on Halloween night? I froze for a minute and just watched. They kept ringing and knocking. I retreated to the bedroom to grab my phone. I called my fiancé, because I'm not smart and should have called the police first. But he doesn't answer as he's asleep and 6 hours away for an FTX. They just keep ringing and knocking for almost 5 minutes. They aren't giving up at all. Some sense finally kicks in, and I call the police non-emergency line. I didn't call 911 because I wasn't sure if it qualified as an emergency. I didn't know what they wanted. Right as the dispatcher takes my name and address, they leave. I tell the dispatcher to cancel the report, and he tells me that if they come back, just call 911. I've never been so scared in my life. I'm home alone with the baby while the fiancé is away. I've never felt so threatened in my own home. My fiancé is hoping that they were either trying to prank someone or that they were drunk trying to get into the wrong apartment. My instinct tells me they weren't friendly, and my instinct is usually right. I'm nearly defenseless in my own home. I'm not about to open the door to 2 strange people. I'm still shaking today. I don't want to leave the apartment. I really hope they don't come back again. I'd rather not have to threaten that I have a weapon, now that I know where it is and will use it. If absolutely necessary, I can at least use it as a last line of defense. I'd rather not encounter them ever again. I really do hope that they stay away. We must have been 13 at the time, nearing the end of the still respectable trick-or-treating age. It was just the 2 of us, Shauna and me. Other friends of ours were grouped up in their own candy crusade, and it was the first year that I hadn't joined up with the usual small circle of friends for the night of door knocking and the shrill calls for junk food to fill our pillowcases. This year, however, was going to be different. One fall afternoon, I was hanging out at our local park. The usual suspects were all there. The kids from school, the boys from the hockey team, and a couple of stragglers hanging out with the loose ends of their frayed jeans. Of course, the usual games were going on. Freeze tag, teeter-totter, and testing our ability to withstand G-forces of the merry-go-round. Shauna lived directly across the street from the park. During that summer, I became aware of something new and marvelous. Shauna's smooth, tanned, and shapely legs. One day she strode across the road, in through the gate, and across the lush green grass like a goddess. Her dark walnut hair swayed, with eyes that flamed with a new light, and a smile that made me dizzy, nervous, and very happy. It was a full-on puppy love infatuation, but I was a year her senior, and I was definitely not cool. Moreover, becoming aware of girls in a romantic sense had just begun to happen for me. Learning how to speak to girls would take just a few more years to master with any dignity. But by fall, a few things had fallen into place that led to my one-night, one-on-one evening stroll around the neighborhood with my crush. First off, I lived half a block away. We often found ourselves walking home together on the final stretch to the top of the town where our home streets bordered the forest, the rest of the entourage having forked off earlier on the way. This gave me about 7 to 10 minutes of private time to display to Shauna what a charming little bugger I was, while I was stumbling and stammering over words, letting her know that I thought she was as sweet as a caramilk bar. The second point in my favor is that some dummy had just broken up with Shauna. She was feeling down. Her heart was freshly broken. Meanwhile, all summer long and into the school year, I had been there for her. Foolish, fumbling, awkward. Her stalwart admirer, and her amateur confessor of affections. Losing the boyfriend also left her temporarily on the outs with her social circle, confessing to me while we rode the swings in the setting after. Shauna didn't feel like going to anyone's Halloween party. She suggested that we go to skip Halloween and trick-or-treating altogether. Now, while I wasn't very tall and stylish, cool, or even athletic, I was the opposite of the flavor of the day for girls of the dating age. I wasn't an asshole. I was a sweetheart, good listener, genuine of heart, and a little Mr. Pick-me-up. The world already had enough assholes as it was, and from what I could see, they were still being produced at a rapid rate, so I was sticking to being nice and playing the long game. When I told her that I would gladly drop my friends to take her door to door for the night, she smiled and asked, "Do you mean like a Halloween date?" I said, "Shauna, you're like the prettiest girl in town sight." It's what we called our part of town on top of the mountain. And even if it's just a Halloween date, that's pretty cool for me. I didn't mind torpedoing my self-esteem if it lifted hers a bit. We both knew going steady wasn't a real possibility. We were going to wear masks, hang out for a night as other people, and ignore the rules of our social circle. It was fun, going out. I was dressed as a ninja, wrapped head to toe in black, with only the over-alert and searching eyes open between the mesh. A plastic samurai sword in a sheath over my back, my belt loaded with throwing stars. I was a deadly chunky monkey, and on my arm I had a Princess Jasmine. Shauna's dark hair, tanned complexion, and her youth frame were devastating in swaths of sheer fabric. What a babe. We laughed and joked as we crossed paths with friends, and with Shauna's veil covering her face, only my sharp blue eyes were visible. Many people weren't able to confidently assert our identities. We'd done it. We'd slipped away with our identities beneath our costumes. For at least a few hours. It was just a boy who had liked a girl, who enjoyed being liked by this boy. As we made our way down the home stretch, the final blocks towards home, high on the sugar rush from the candy and chocolate, maybe even a little bit of romance, Shauna let me take her hand in mine. We didn't say anything about it. I just reached over and laced her fingers in mine, kept our feet moving, our eyes mostly down. Little did we know that the real evil was lurking behind the door of the next home. Hell's Night was just one knock away. The house looked like every other house on the block. Small miner's house was built by the town mine company decades ago, spruced up, and extended in size by an addition, covered in the typical thin sheet roof to assist the heavy accumulation of seasonal snowflakes in sliding off, and ringed in the standard white wooden fence. Lights were on, and the sounds of a party rang down the walk. What we couldn't know was that this wasn't a Halloween party. This was actually a drinking party. Shauna and I strolled up the walk, up the cement stairs to the door. We had knocked on the door, and then we hollered, "Trick or treat!" We waited. There was no answer. The rock music was very loud. We could hear howls, calls, and laughter mingling with curse words. Shauna had said that we should go. I said that we should just yell even louder. We knocked again, and we yelled much louder. The door had flung open. On the other side of the screen door stood a long-haired, Scooby-Doo looking shaggy dude wearing an even more raggedy looking underskirt. He was drunk, possibly even high, and instead of handing out candy, he was tossing F-bombs. I can't explain where it had come from, but even at that young age, I found myself believing I was 10 times larger when in the company of a girl. So rather than backing off the steps and skirting away from the crazy standing across the threshold, I mouthed off to him. I asked this loser what he expected when it was Halloween night, and his lights were on. Surely he hadn't been the only trick-or-treater banging on his door. Up to this point in my life, I had only been in the company of happy drunks. Those men were the typical over-affectionate, joyous drunks of the 3 Hungarian families that my parents socialized with. This punk was the other kind of drunk, the really mean kind. The screen door flung open. His arms had reached out, grabbed Shauna, and began pulling her inside as he said something about having her join the party. Screaming ensued. Shauna was pulling back, trying to get free from his skeletal grasp. I was screaming at him to just let go of her, and he was screaming at me to get lost. I dropped the candy bag, grabbed the screen door in my hands, and slammed it against his arm and the door frame. Shauna was let free. I clenched her hand, and we bolted off the steps, sprinted out of the yard. The lunatic drunk screamed at us. The door had slammed, and he was on our heels. We hit the street and began running for our lives when the guy pounding the pavement behind us. Scared kids run pretty fast. Drunk men happen to run less fast. But the blind rage this guy had kept coming at us, screaming that he was going to kill me with every heart-pounding stride. We kept running, screaming, and Shauna was bawling in terror. We kept running as fast as we could. My house was right there. I held tightly onto Shauna's hand, pulled her behind me across the corner of our park pad, down the ramp along the side of the house, and then yanked her into a hard right, dashing into the always unlocked basement door, slamming the door right behind me. Shauna and I fell over on our backs against it, shaking, crying, and trying to catch our breaths between gasping sobs. 2 seconds later, the door at our backs was kicked open, and Shauna and I turned to see the murderous, sweaty, violently cursing face of our pursuer pressed against the window of the basement door, his fist pounding on the window as Shauna and I used all the strength we had to keep the door from being pushed all the way open, while screaming for him to go away and yelling for help. The basement was our old storage. Next to the door stood a wall of deep wooden shelves filled with dirt. In the soil were potatoes. The damp, cool air smelled like earth and death. Then suddenly out from the darkness, my father had emerged. In a millisecond, he had pulled Shauna and me behind him, reached into the dirt bins, and pulled out a potato. Then stepped to the door. He reefed it open, grabbed the maniac by the throat, and jammed the whole raw potato into his mouth. I remember the shock on the drunk's punk face. He didn't know what had just happened. His eyes were the size of saucers, and before he could even react, my father had grabbed him by the hair and threw him backwards, stumbling, sending him falling on his ass. Then my father had slammed the door, locked it, grabbed the 2 terrorized, bawling, and shaking children, took us inside and upstairs. Shock of him must have set in. I can't recall much of anything afterwards. Shauna was driven home, and I was still upset. The great Halloween date had ended in terror. I lost my bag of candy and treats during it all. I also was shocked at how my father came to our rescue, and would later share nervous laughter with Shauna about how that guy must have felt suddenly having a dirty potato jammed into his mouth. I was also super impressed that my father was kick-ass when he needed to be. All in all, I still recall the sweet, soft lightness of Shauna's hand in mine the night Halloween terror became a real thing. It was definitely a night to remember. My name is Anne. Back in 1973, when I was 16, my younger sister, my dad, and I had just moved into a new house that my dad had built in a remote area near the Heights in Minnesota. In this area, there was only one other house a few slots away from us. When we moved in on Halloween, my dad had to leave town for a little while and gave my sister and I a key and instructions to move my stuff in. None of my dad's belongings were there just yet, except for some furniture. I got ready to go to a costume party with my older sister, who didn't live with us at the time. She picked us up at around 7 p.m., just as it began to snow. During that Halloween party, I had met a friend, Jay, and was enjoying his company so much that I decided to continue the conversation with him at my house. We got there at about 1:30 a.m. After realizing we didn't win the Halloween costume, I was dressed up as a witch at the time. Me and my sister had our own domain downstairs. The house was huge with 2 kitchens. Jay and I were sitting downstairs in the large living room that had windows all around, right around ground level. Where Jay and I had been sitting, we could see the driveway and the front door. We had one lamp on, and the light at the front door was shining and illuminating the driveway and the room. Around 2:30 in the morning, we were sitting on a love seat chatting away. At no time did we discuss anything Halloween related, like the supernatural or paranormal. Suddenly we heard a voice. First I noticed the voice was like no other that I'd ever heard before. Then I noticed what the voice was vocalizing. To my horror, this voice was moaning in a pathetic and horrible way, filled with loud pain and suffering. I remember marveling at the tone of the voice. It was no different, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, just when I thought that I couldn't take any more, it went from this horrible moan to this insane, maniacal laughter. It was absolutely terrifying. Then it went back down to a moan, back to a laugh, then back to a moan once again, before stopping. Jay and I looked at each other wide-eyed and open-mouthed. "It has to be a Halloween trick. Someone is playing on us," I said. "Yeah," Jay replied to me hesitantly. "Let's search around and see if we can find what is going on." Jay agreed with me, so we both went towards the hallway. Jay took the stairs up to the foyer. I continued down the hallway to my little sister's room. I had opened up the door and noticed that my sister was truly asleep. I woke her up anyways and asked her if she knew anything about what was going on, or if she had heard it. My sister was irritated with me for waking her up, but said that she had heard nothing, which was mystifying considering the volume. I went back down to the hallway, towards the living room, just as Jay was coming down the stairs. He was as white as a sheet. "I heard it again up there," he had said. "No way," I replied. "I wasn't that far away. I should have heard it too." Neither of us could explain it. No joke. Jay and I went back to the living room. We sat down on the love seat. We talked about the happenings and affirmed that we both had experienced the same thing. Then we changed the subject, tried to forget about it when it happened yet again. This time, though, the sound this time seemed to permeate our very souls. Jay and I suddenly felt very sad. When the moaning and laughter stopped this time, we both knew that this wasn't a joke of any kind, and we weren't ready to admit it to each other. "All right," I said. "The search is on. We find out who this prankster is or else die trying, right?" We searched every inch of the house outside. No one had come near the house in hours. I could tell by the new layer of undisturbed snow. We spent about 45 minutes looking in ovens, freezers, lamps, even under the table in the house, under every single couch, and in every couch, around chairs and corners, and ultimately throughout every inch of the property. We had found nothing, and no one, and I knew of no one who could even think of such a Halloween prank, let alone anyone who could execute it with such professionalism. I described the sound as the most frightening voice that I had ever heard, and by some horrible misfortune, I was able to hear it yet again. I swear that my heart would stop instantly. Yet my Halloween horror wasn't over just yet. Jay and I had finished our search. We went back downstairs. We started to discuss the possibilities that something supernatural was actually happening, but then we brushed it off. In some kind of crazy delusion, we wanted to believe that it was really just a joke somehow. This illusion could soon be crushed. The eerie voice began yet again. Only this time it was nothing like the other times. Now it had shook us completely. Jay and I were both completely filled with feelings of despair, hopelessness, helplessness, and pointlessness. I struggled to say something, but I couldn't manage it. It felt pointless to think at all. Tears were streaming from both of our eyes. We both experienced the sensation of our skins crawling. I truly believe that I and Jay were in the presence of pure evil, and on a personal level at that. When Jay and I had snapped out of it, we looked at each other, saw the tears on our faces. When our eyes met, I knew that Jay knew exactly what I was experiencing, and vice versa. We were also convinced that this was no prank. By now it was close to 4 o'clock in the morning. We were literally exhausted. Jay had refused to leave me and my sister here alone. So he decided to sleep on the couch, and I went to my room. I spent the rest of the night in terror. I was worried about going near the bedroom door, because the image of a creature waiting to kill me on the other side. I felt that this was not coming from our minds, but rather it was coming to me from somewhere else. I laid awake until the sun was up, and I heard Jay awake out in the living room. It was definitely a horrifying experience that I will never forget, and I remember like it was just yesterday.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.